All right, everyone, welcome to the Exposing Grief YouTube channel, which you know by now if you subscribed or you watched any other videos or interviews. The mission of this channel is to remove the stigma of grief and expose it for what it truly is, which is a natural way of living and loving. I am excited to bring this new interviewee to us this month, Brenda DeMotte, another grief therapist. So you are the first grief therapist I've sat with for this channel. So I'm super excited to have you here. It's always fun to be with a fellow therapist and geek out about anything and everything grief. So I'm excited to have you here to shed your light and your expertise on grief with our viewers. So I won't waste another minute. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what got you into guiding others in their grief journey.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate having this opportunity. I'm Brenda DeMotte, as Brittany had said, and I began my career in funeral service at about the age of 16.
Wow.
I started for a summer job through college, and after summers in high school, and then continue on through college. And my interests were always in the sciences, the medical sciences preferably. And so the goal was to look at some medical field that fit me well and that I would be interested in. And as I worked in funeral service and went to college and got my all the undergraduate stuff taken care of, the funeral service field started to look a little more interesting. It's on the medical side, but I didn't have to worry about making decisions that would harm people, and so this seemed to fit very nicely into that interest into the sciences. So when it became time for me to declare a major, I decided mortuary science. I went to college in San Francisco and studied pre-med and mortuary science there, and came back to my local hometown where I'd been working summers, and did full-time, worked as a mortician and a funeral director there for full-time for about 10 years. And it was in that practice, in that field, that I got very curious about what was happening to people psychologically. I knew that what we were providing as a funeral home in funerals and rituals to commemorate and celebrate people. I also saw something very intriguing happening to the survivors. And when it made sense, I decided I wanted to push my career into the direction of the psychology of grief. And so I went back to graduate school in the University of Minnesota, moved from North Dakota to Minnesota, and got into the graduate school program there. I was able to specialize. At that time, they had something called University Without Walls.
Sure.
And it was designed for people who had degrees already and had a level of expertise, but wanted to really deepen that. And so I was able to pick and choose throughout the universities around the Twin Cities and some of the leading professors, and just choose the classes that I wanted to take, along with some of the graduate studies that were necessary, and built my own degree on grief therapy. And from there, once I graduated from that, I just started my practice. I began with a group practice first, and had some great mentors along the way, excellent mentors who really got my feet planted firmly in the grief environment. And from there, began my own practice and started speaking in a lot of groups. At that time, there were a lot of grief groups. And then eventually, I did that for probably 30 plus years here. And now I just finished a book. It's kind of blossomed into a bunch of interesting pieces for me. And I've loved every minute of it. It's been a deep and enriched blessed experience. I've been really lucky to do what I do with the people that I do it with. It's just fascinating and intriguing at the same time.
Yeah, what an incredible experience, and just the opportunity to grow and the platform you created for yourself. That's incredible. And I'm glad you brought up the book, because that's kind of the meat of why we're here. But before we jump into that, I do want to ask a little bit. So you just recently retired the clinical side of your professional work. So can you speak a little bit more to what your career looked like in the clinical setting, and then how you continue to share your expertise, whether that's through the book or through different outlets for those who need them, and or how you just continue to feel that passion of grief?
Sure. In the clinical practice, I primarily as a therapist, you're a generalist. You deal with all kinds of mental health when you're dealing with that. So I had a practice full of marriage and personality disorders and mental health, chronic illnesses.
Yeah.
But I always marketed and made it clear that what I was interested in is working with the bereavement side. And so as a funeral director, I had often worked with many of the funeral homes within the Twin Cities as well. So I could kind of plug into them and say, refer when you're ready, refer those people in.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this, it started in that regard. And so eventually it kind of grew into a primary bereavement practice, which was fine with me. I was happy with that.
Yeah.
And so, it started out just sort of getting people to understand a lot of what I did was teaching. I feel like there's a teacher inside of me.
Yeah.
And once I knew the guts and the anatomy of what the human response to change was, then it was just a matter of transferring that knowledge to others.
Sure.
And I don't know how technical you want me to get here, but I could see that when people are in bereavement, there's a lot of, their life just turns to chaos. And everything they thought they could understand or thought they knew or they thought was the truth or they thought culturally was accurate suddenly turns out to be, I'm not so sure that this even is the right thing anymore. And so their whole world kind of gets turned upside down and inside out. And when I understood that chaos, I knew what I needed to do, because one of the ways we handle chaos is try and bring a sense of order to that. And one of the ways I can bring order to that is help people understand in a very succinct way, perhaps, what is happening to them. And once they sort of understood I like to call it the anatomy of grief from my science, but once they understood the anatomy of it, it started to, okay, I get it, I can understand, and they could run with that and then use it in their continuation of their own bereavement. They could refer back to it. So, it kind of turned into a teaching tool, really, as well as allowing people to just share where they were, kind of look at the nuances of what was happening, if they're getting stuck, if they're missing something, if they're believing in a falsehood that's really holding them back, that kind of, those pieces of therapy always are in there.
Right.
But the groundwork was always offering them knowledge, continuing to offer them knowledge, because where I come from my point of view, is that knowledge is power. Absolutely. And without knowledge, we just really don't get anywhere.
Right.
So once I could give them the knowledge I started to see as relevant, and when they took that and could work with it, then you start to see some real growth, and they can use that throughout the rest of their lives as they work with their bereavement. So, that's kind of how the practice started to develop itself.
Sure. Yeah. And what a great thing. I mean, I do, the majority of the work I do with my clients is this meaning making work. And oftentimes clients will sit with me and kind of wonder, how do I make meaning out of something that doesn't make sense? Right. Yeah. So I love that educational or teaching standpoint of, here's the anatomy of grief, right? We can understand that. That's more tangible, right? And once we get that, we can then kind of move through it. And I'm guessing, based on the title of your book, that you might speak a little bit more to that. So let's jump into that, since that's the main reason we're here. So tell us a little bit about your book, Grief Demystified, A Companion Through Change.
Got it right here. Perfect.
Are you willing to give kind of a Spark Notes version of the book, or a quick kind of summary?
This book is my what do I want to say? It's everything I would use in therapy. I wrote it as a resource book for new therapists, people that were just getting into the business and trying to understand bereavement, and using it as a tool to help them as they practice with other people. But I also wanted it to be something that my clients could use, or the community in general could use. So it became a piece of work that just sort of walked through each component of what I would use in my therapy practice, or each component of what I would bring in my speaking engagements, but developed it in just that particular way, and developed it a little bit more so they could understand the underpinnings of it all. And so this book really walks through all of that information, all of that anatomy, with just a little more basic understanding underneath it.
I love that. So is there, a part of the book, like a particular part of the book that you really love or that you really want to highlight for our viewers?
Mhm.
I mean,
Well,
I'm sure it's
that's
all
like
really great.
asking me if I got a favorite child.
I know, I know. It's all great information, right? How do we highlight just one?
Yeah, really. And especially when you just have loved what's developed and how you've developed it. It all of it is valuable. All
Yeah,
of it is
I
valuable.
don't doubt
And
it. Yeah.
yeah. And to me, it's valuable. It's been very successful in my
Yeah.
practice. But I think the part that I feel most important that people sort of understand, it's really important to know all of the pieces that's in here. But the one component that I just feel powerfully motivated by is something I call the myths of
Mm,
grief. There is a lot of cultural information out there, as well as just general motivation that people share with others when they're bereaved to try and help them feel better. They just want
mhm.
to make people feel better or lighten their load or say something that quote unquote helps. And I
Yeah.
get that. That's compassion. That's caring about each other. That's all a good thing. However, if you've never been there, um, sometimes we don't understand what we're saying isn't really very helpful.
Yeah.
And in fact, is a myth, isn't really
Yeah.
true. So I came up with 6 or 7 that I thought were the big headliners, the ones that we hear
Mhm.
that are just egregious and are more likely to get people to get stuck or stumble on
Yeah.
and hold them back. So if I could open up those doors, relieve that information, and give them again more knowledge, so that if people shared some of these myths with them, they were well enough informed to be able to say to themselves, mm-mm, that's not true. So I don't want to lead myself down that path because it's not going to be helpful. So
Right.
the myths are probably the piece that I am most interested in making sure that people understand and keep in their memory banks as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. I had recently done a segment on here of debunking top 5 myths, right? And I'm so
Yeah,
passionate about that, right? And these are
yeah,
the top 5, kind of similar to yours, of these are the most common
yeah,
that I hear people come in my office with, or just hearing out in the community or whatever. And yeah, having that
yeah.
discussion around,
Or
not,
even the media. The media still
yeah,
perpetuates things that
yeah.
when I hear it, the hair in the back of my neck goes up because it's like, whoop,
Oh,
whoop, 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 whoop. We're passing
hold on.
something on here that isn't quite gonna do it, but
I know. Yeah.
that just keeps us working.
Absolutely. Yeah. It keeps us getting people through the door. So for the viewers who are interested, which how could you not be, where can they find your book? Where can we purchase it? Is it available
Oh,
electronically? I mean, what are
yeah.
options?
The book is on Amazon.com. So all you have to do is get to Amazon.com and ask for the book by its title and author, and it'll pop right up and you can order it right there.
Wonderful. And is
You
there a
can
Kindle
also, if you
version?
need, if you wanted to, you could email me and
Okay.
ask for one specifically, but I think it would
Perfect.
be much faster to
Yeah.
get it through Amazon.
Yeah. Perfect. And I'll put your email, and I'll also put that Amazon link in there too, so people can just
Yeah.
click on that right away and it's easily accessible
Yep.
for them.
Good.
Do you have any other workings, any other books kind of that you're exploring or kind of working on coming up in the future?
Yeah. Well, there's nature. uh, Grief really starts to bring back the truth of nature.
Mhm.
Man kind of creates our own little belief system. And many of these myths that you and I have discussed or touched on are many of those man-made myths, like lightning
Mhm.
doesn't strike in the same place twice, or
Right.
you've heard it all, you'll get over this, that time will heal, all those things. Those myths have been created by man to be helpful.
Sure.
um, I kind of lost my train of thought here for a second. So what I recognize in that is that nature really is the teacher. That the
Yeah.
natural law that we live in is kind of missed because we're living in cities and communities where we don't really get in touch with the laws of nature as readily as we used to do
Love
in
that.
previous agricultural cultures. So um, one of the things I've thought about is doing something that's just looking at the nature, quote unquote, the
Mm.
nature of grief and how the laws of nature really run bereavement,
Yeah.
or really help us understand bereavement, I should
Sure.
say.
Sure.
And then I've also done some reading on quantum mechanics and
Mm.
bereavement.
Sure.
And that whole topic has really intrigued me too, which falls in line with the laws of nature,
Yeah.
physics, etc. And that's been an interesting play on how our bereavement really matches up with nature. So that's kind of noodling in the back there somewhere, but I'm
Yeah.
not certain how I'm going to organize it or put it all together.
It's exciting. Keeps our brain working. I think those are great.
Yeah,
I
it sure
look forward
does.
to hearing how
Yeah.
that goes for you. Wonderful. Well, is there anything else you'd like our viewers to know about yourself or kind of what you're currently doing? Anything else that you want
Sure. Well, even though I'm not working in the clinical practice any longer, I continue to try and work with the public and educate in
Yeah.
professional speaking engagements. So I have over the summer multiples of those set up. So if anybody is looking for a speaker on the
Yeah.
topic of bereavement or the response to change or any version of that, I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
interested.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so at least that keeps me involved in what I'm doing and helping me move in that direction, in the direction I'd like to be. I'd like to be involved in this. I don't want to just drop it,
Yes.
but at the same time, it's nice to kind of not have that clinical practice on a daily basis. So yeah, the speaking is probably one of the pieces, and then to market the book, to make sure that book gets out there in front of people.
Wonderful. Absolutely. And the speaking events or workshops that you have in the summer, are those open to the public? Is that something our viewers could email you about? And it's
Well, depending upon the venue, some
Okay.
of them are, yes.
Okay.
A lot of them are the grief coalitions within the Twin Cities. I've
Yes.
worked with them for decades. And so those are often just the bereaved people who are in those coalitions, but I know they've been opening up to public as well.
Sure.
But other organizations, and it can be anyone, financial organizations, funeral homes, churches, schools, they often contact too. So, and they are publicly open. So any of those venues would be available or, are possible.
Sure, sure. Well, I thank you so much again, Brenda, for your time. I really appreciate it. It was fun to hear more about you and your book and to share that with the viewers.
Great.
I thank you for taking the time to watch this interview and learn more about Brenda and her passion and what she's doing. If you have questions for her, her email is at the bottom. Email, is that the best way to get a hold of you, Brenda?
Yeah, it
Okay.
really is the best way right now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So her email is below there. My email is there as well. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Stay tuned. We got a lot of good stuff coming to you in May. Otherwise, let's get through this really rainy, dreary spring. A brighter May is coming, right? Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank
again,
you, Brittany,
Brenda.
for having me. It's been fun. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll see you in May, viewers. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brenda, again for your time. It was such a pleasure chatting with you. And like I said, it's so fun to sit with a fellow grief therapist and talk about anything and everything grief. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing about your book. It's such a wonderful resource and has great information in there. So you viewers, be sure to click on the link below, get a copy of the book and use it however you see fit. It's great for both professionals and for individuals who are walking in their grief journey. So be sure to snag that up. Brenda's email is down in the comment box. My email is down there if you want to reach out to me. As always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything coming your way. May we have some really great content coming to you that I'm super excited about. We're talking about remembering loved ones, and one of the most challenging things of that is, what do we do with our loved ones' things? So we talk about navigating that. I also have an interview with an incredible human being that I just cannot wait to bring her on, Ashley Mondor. She's fantastic. I cannot wait to interview her and share that interview with you all. So be sure to stay tuned, subscribe, get through this rainy April, and we will be in May before you know it. Take care.